for measuring reciprocating velocity, we have seen last time a seismic mass mounted over a spring and damper used as velocity for the purpose of measuring reciprocating velocity. Now, this is another version, this modified seismic velocity pickup. Here the conventional mass is replaced by the coil, because in the earlier setup we had the mass here and spring, this is damper, and to measure the relative velocity of the mass we had separately the moving coil, moving magnet pickup like that. Now, the moving coil weight itself is taken as mass here for this instrumentation. So, that is the only difference. So, this was our earlier instrumentation. So, now this mass and the coil mass are, this is our permanent magnet, and this permanent magnet is here as it is, and the coil mass is taken as the seismic mass here. So, seismic mass is the coil itself, and the spring for spring you have got the whole mass is suspended from a spring, and for a damping purpose this whole volume is filled up with an oil, preferably a silicon oil, which does not decompose in course of time. So, damping is from the filled oil. The spring, for the spring we have got, this is Ks, for the mass the coil itself. So, the same vibrating body, the whole instrument is fixed to the vibrating body, bottom is the vibrating body, a table or whatever it is, whose velocity we are interested to measure. So, bolt it, and as it vibrates more than the natural frequency of this mass spring system, say twice more than that, then we will find the relative motion of the mass with reference to the frame, that is now the permanent magnet itself forms part of the frame fixed to that. So, any relative motion we have got a voltage output. So, this voltage output will represent when the frequency is much more than the natural frequency, the input velocity itself, that what you have learnt yesterday. So, this is one modified version of the earlier type of seismic pickup, where we have separately a mass, but the mass and coil are combined together in this setup. So, it is cheaper in this sense and simple in construction. So, this completes our measurement of reciprocating velocity. We are seeing three type of velocities. One is continuous motion, second reciprocating motion, and the third one is velocity of rotating objects. This is simple to measure. Hence, we find large number of methods are available for measuring rotating speeds, RPM, or rotation per second, rotation per hour. All these things are available in plenty. Few of them we will see. The first one is the flyball sensor, is used since a long time, especially in power plants. The turbine speed is controlled by having this flyball mechanism. This flyball sensor, it senses the speed of the turbine shaft and gives a signal for the control of the speed. So, you find this flyball mechanism, that is, if m is the mass of the flyball, then centrifugal force equal to m omega squared r, proportional to omega squared, omega being rotating speed. So, this force is transmitted to this collar. This is the collar, which is mounted free on the rotating shaft. Rotating shaft rotates at omega. So, the part of the force through the linkage, the force, the centrifugal force is transmitted to this collar. So, the collar tries to rise, and in the process it is compressing a spring. So, proportional to the force it gets compressed, and that distance is, this is our output signal XO. So, now if you plot the XO versus omega, you got some nonlinear characteristics. That is because of the quadratic equation comes into picture. But the operating speed of the turbine will be somewhere in the middle of this linear portion of the curve. So, the speed will be varying along this, then immediately if speed falls down, then the governor, this is the centrifugal, it will be sensed. When speed falls, this comes closer, and then some linkage will be actuated, and some more turbine speed steps will be taken to increase the turbine speed. That is for power plants operation, this is widely used. Still in some of the tachometers, flyball mechanism are still used, old type. This is one of the conventional methods. And now we have got the modern methods of measuring the shaft rotation. But there in the rotating shaft itself, we have connected suitably the fly balls. This is the shaft where there we have connected. But now we find in the rotating shaft, we fix one reflecting tape. This is supplied by the manufacturer. So we just cut a small piece and fix it. It will have its own adhesive. You can just paste it on the shaft. And this is based upon the photoelectric speed probe. But even before that, we have learnt this proximity pickup. We already learned proximity pickup. Where if we have the suppose to the rotating shaft, a gear is fixed. This is a gear. So a gear is fixed, and at the top of at the rim, near about the rim of the rotating gear, we can fix a proximity pickup. This is proximity pickup. Whenever your tooth comes in front of the proximity pickup, one pulse is given. Suppose there are 10 teeth, then 10 pulses will be given, and this is connected to universal electronic counter, where it can be counted per second. So per second, so many pulses will be there. That divided by the 10 will give the RPM per second. Suppose you can select a different base, 1 second or 10 second, whatever it is. Suppose if you selected 1 second, whatever be the pulse, it will count it, and that if you divide by 10, that will give the rotating speed per second. That is the inductance principle. The principle is here is inductance principles. The inductance varies whenever a tooth comes. So inductance principle. So when you don't have any gear, anything like that, what you can do, you can substitute gear by a screw. Now the shaft is there, we can substitute it by a screw head. Just by a screw head, and now put your proximity pickup near the screw. Whenever the screw head comes in front of the proximity pickup, one pulse will be made. In all these methods, we are measuring the pulses. That's why we can call it pulse counting method of speed measurement. There we are measuring when the reluctance. This is actually reluctance variations. We are under inductance principles. When the reluctance varies, we got one pulse, and in the other one, we have in another method, we can have light source. Instead of the inductance principle, we can have light source. In this probe tip, we have got light source. It contains 2 chambers. At the top chamber, now we have the lamp, and the bottom one we have got the photocell. And in the rotating shaft, we fix a tape, like reflecting tape, and the light falls on the tape and it gets reflected. Whenever the tape comes in front of the probe tip, you get one pulse. This will be photocell will be forming part of an electronic circuit. So one pulse electric voltage pulse will be produced. In case there is no disc connected to, in case you have a disc already in another way of let us look in another way of measuring this using this lamp and photocell is fix a disc to the rotating shaft like this, with the number of holes, say 4 or 6 holes. Whenever a hole comes in front of this, say this measuring station, lamp is there this side, other side photocell. When the hole comes, the light passes through the hole and it falls on the photocell, and photocell will be forming a part of electronic circuit, and one pulse will be produced. So whenever a hole comes, it will be producing one pulse. In such measurements, say either in the proximity pickup, using proximity pickup, inductance principle or reluctance variation, or in the reflecting type of photocell, or in this is we call it obstruction type of photoelectric speed probe. All these things are part of pulse counting method of speed measurement. The error in all these methods, error is plus or minus 1 pulse. And how do we say plus or minus 1 pulse? For that, we just see here as an example, say consider the disc where the hole is there as measuring station. When the hole comes, 1 pulse is produced. Suppose the shaft rotates, start rotating at this station, station A, and it starts rotating in the direction. It comes and stops at station B just before the measuring station. Then it has completed almost 1 rotation, but since at no time this was in front of the measuring station, no pulse is produced. So we find theoretically it is rotated 1 rotation, but no measurement, actually measured is 0. So error is 1 minus 0 plus error. This is plus 1 error, plus 1 pulse is error. And in another way, suppose the hole started just in front and stopped immediately after it passes through the measuring station. So it is registered as 1, measured as 1 pulse or 1 rotation, because only 1 hole means 1 rotation, 1 pulse represents 1 rotation. And really, if the size is small, it may rotate at very few degrees only. So in limit it may be 0. So 0 minus measured is minus 1, actual rotation 0. So it is minus error. So plus or minus here 1 rotation is the error. Similarly, if you have 4 holes, so 1/4 of the rotation will be the error. So as the number of holes increases, the error comes down. This is the advantage of having more number of holes. So that is the pulse counting method. And next is we have DC and AC tachometers. DC and AC tachometers. That is, in a DC generator, the voltage developed is proportional to the rotor speed. See, the voltage output of the DC generator is calibrated in terms of rotation. That is in terms of RPM. So it is then it is called a tacho generator. Yeah, tacho generator. Sorry. Tacho generator, AC tacho generator. That is simple. Ordinary DC generator is used to measure the RPM of the rotor. That because voltage output we know is proportional to the RPM of the rotor. So voltage is calibrated in terms of RPM. Now in the AC tacho generator, what is done is it is induction two phase screw cage induction motor that can be used for measuring speed. What is done is the 90 degree there are 2 coils at electrically 90 degrees and separate them out, and in one of the coils you give the supply voltage, say at a particular frequency, so 5 kilohertz for example, 5 kilohertz, and in the other winding you will get the output proportional to speed as per this diagram. Suppose omega varies, starts at a high omega and falls to 0 and rotates in the negative direction, then in that case the EO output from the other one will be a modulated wave like this. So again, if you have only one direction rotation, we can simply use an AC voltmeter to give the magnitude of the rotation or rotating speed, or if it is rotating both the directions, then you will get the direction by using phase sensitive demodulator and low pass filter, what we have learnt earlier. So that is the AC tacho generator. Yeah, if it rotates on both directions, anti-clockwise, then the voltage output should be given to phase sensitive demodulator and so on. That is AC tacho generator. The last method is the eddy current tachometer, which is used in all vehicles, mostly used in vehicles, say a scooter or lorries. In all places they are using this principle, and it gives the speed of the vehicle. The driver can note at any instant while he drives what is the speed of the vehicle or bus. There what is done is from one of the 4 wheels, through a flexible shaft, the rotation is taken to a permanent magnet. Permanent magnet is situated within a copper cup. This is a copper cup. Within a copper cup, actually you have to join this. It's not open. The rim, it's open, but the rim you will see as per the drawings principle. So when it rotates, the magnetic lines are cutting the copper cup. So copper cup is good conductor, so electrical lines are there, so eddy currents are there. And due to eddy current, we have the magnetic lines. That magnetic lines interacting with the rotating magnetic lines, we have got a torque. Yeah? So torque is produced in the copper cup. This torque is absorbed by the spiral spring while it turns. Yeah? That is what we have. The signal flow diagram is, we have omega as the input signal, that is given to the magnet plus the copper cup, and then we have the torque. Yeah, torque is produced from omega. This torque is taken by the spring, spiral spring, and gives rise to an angular rotation theta. So theta will be the rotation in the shaft. The shaft is will be forming part of the cup, and when it rotates, a pointer is attached to the shaft of this cup, and we find the scale is just perpendicular to the board. So when the pointer rotates, it moves over the scale, which is calibrated in terms of earlier known speed. You can write 0, 100, 200 like that RPM, and later on unknown speed you can just use it. So this is the principle of eddy current tachometer, often used. Now since it is RPM, if you multiply with the circumference of the tire, then it will be kilometer per hour. You can use kilometer per hour. That's how it is calibrated in terms. Next we will see the acceleration measurement. So far we have seen displacement measurement, velocity measurement, and now the last acceleration measurement. All these three forms part of motion measurement. Yeah? So dv by dt is acceleration, or d squared x by dt is acceleration. And the main here also we are using the absolute seismic absolute seismic pickup for accelerations. So we put the instrument, all seismic pickup as a for the displacement as for velocity. Here also the whole instrument is put on the body whose acceleration we are measuring. So it's absolute measurement. So the same instrument what we have seen earlier, mass, spring, Ks, and damper, it contains, it is put to the vibrating body, fixed to the vibrating body by bolted to vibrating body. The same acceleration now we are measuring by measuring XO here. That theory is obtained like this. We already derived XO by Xi differential in terms of differential operator by using the from the Newton's law we derived earlier for the displacement measurement. Same equation I written here. Now bringing d squared this side, XO by d squared Xi, that is nothing but XO by Xi 2 dot, and calling K as 1 by omega n squared, then you will get so XO by Xi 2 dot K, and substituting d by I omega, and finding out the magnitude for sinusoidal for the frequency response. You get this equation for the magnitude ratio XO by K by Xi 2 dot, and the phase difference will be phi is equal to tan minus 1 of 2 psi beta by beta squared minus 1, where beta we know already, omega by omega n, the frequency ratio. Now you find the right hand side of these two equations same as what you have derived for the second order systems. Frequency response of second order systems under dynamic response of instruments we have learnt already. The same curves are plotted here, XO by K by Xi 2 dot, and this is beta, that is frequency ratio, and same curve when omega, the resonance condition, beta is equal to 1 resonance conditions, psi is equal to 0 is infinity, and for other values it attains peak value here. And now we know beta maximum for this, the bandwidth, this is called the bandwidth, this is bandwidth, is starting from beta is equal to 0 to beta maximum, that is say for 5% deviation, this one is the ideal condition. So as it deviates, beta increase, it deviates. So maximum deviation, say 5% error, 2% error, accordingly we get beta maximum. So 0 to beta maximum will be the error. So whatever the error, we have to put it here. Suppose 2% error means, so psi is equal to 0.8, 0.8, and 2% error means 0.98 you have to put, and find out what is the beta value. For a given psi is 0.8, we can find the beta value. That is beta maximum. That is how for any given error, 2% error means the magnitude ratio will be 0.98. Suppose the psi is 0.2, suppose psi is equal to 0.2, and the error is 2% means for 0.2 the error is positive side. So you have to put 1.02 here and then solve this equation. So for putting the magnitude ratio, you should be careful in taking up the noting down the value of psi and accordingly take it. If the psi is less than say 0.7, you should put a positive side, or all higher values it is negative, it is smaller value, so negative is the negative value, so you should be less than 1. For a smaller psi, more than 1 you have to put positive side, error is positive, measured is more than the theoretical one. So that's how the bandwidth is fixed. But now we find beta maximum. Suppose beta maximum is equal to say for in a given example maybe 0.8, beta maximum 0.8, that is omega maximum by omega n is equal to 0.8. So omega maximum is equal to 0.8 times omega n, 0 to omega. This is bandwidth. We want to have more bandwidth, so omega n should be more. For having more omega n, what is omega n? Omega n is equal to root of Ks by m. This is what you have learnt earlier. So for having large omega n, we should have large spring constant. So it is a hard spring. So for measuring the velocity and displacement by using seismic pickup, we should have a soft spring. But for the acceleration measurement, instrument is same, but the spring what we have to select is should be a hard spring. That is main difference in design of seismic pickup for displacement and velocity. Displacement, velocity, and acceleration. Acceleration, for acceleration purpose, you should select a harder spring. For displacement and velocity measurement, you should have a soft spring. So this should be hard, and the mass also, mass to have a large omega n, mass should be small. That also possible. Okay, we can have smaller mass, it will not give rise to any loading effect. So generally the harder spring is selected. So that is the bandwidth, and phase difference we know as within the bandwidth for psi is equal to 0.6 or 0.8, it's more or linear. So this is what we can accept. So this is the basic principle with which the acceleration measurement is made, but making in this fashion it is little bit cumbersome. So we got simplified versions of the accelerometer. That actual construction actually available in the market, available accelerometers, they have one of the constructions here. That is, first we are seeing the potentiometer type accelerometer, just a mass suspended on both sides by springs, and instead of having damper, the volume is filled with silicon oil for damping purpose, and the relative motion of the mass is measured by a potentiometer circuit. Here we have omega n or Fn. The natural frequency is 100 Hz, around 100 Hz, because there is some resistance for the wiper to move over the resistance is part of the potentiometer circuit. So the relative motion is measured by potentiometer as an output voltage, as you learnt earlier how the potentiometer works. Instead of potentiometer, we can also use LVDT. So this point we give it to the core, and we will have the the cylindrical constructions will be fixed to the casing, and you can take the output. So this is LVDT. Either a potentiometer or LVDT we can use to measure the relative motion of the mass with reference to the frame of the instrument. If you use LVDT, resistance for motion is small, then the omega n goes up to 300 Hz. Higher omega n means we have got higher bandwidth, that is advantage. So another type is the cantilever type, and here the xi 2 dot is measuring direction is this one. Here also it is this one. Xi 2 dot measurement direction. Always in the instrument accelerometer, they write the measurement direction. So for this type, suppose it moves this way due to inertia, it tries to in earlier, so it bends. Inertia force, due to inertia force, when it is accelerated, it bends. When it bends, then you will find the stress and strain are produced at the near about the fixed end of the cantilever, and that strain is converted into an electrical signal by using strain gauges. So strain gauge bridge and all it will built either by using you can use carrier frequency amplifier, which you have learnt already. It will form the strain gauge, two strain gauge will be forming two adjacent arms of the bridge network, and the whole instrumentation is same, carrier frequency amplifier. We have got oscillator, excitation, the modulated wave, amplified, then demodulated, and low pass filter, and then the signal comes out. All those things we have learned. I am not repeating those things. So that final reading will be calibrated in terms of accelerations. How it is calibrated by suppose when you want to calibrate, suppose this is the basic instrument, we put it on the table, and then you will find G will be acting. G is the acceleration due to gravity. So due to the G, the mass is converted in terms of weight. So the weight, this weight acts over the spring and it deforms a distance, and that distance is measured by this relative displacement pickup, and that reading of the instrument we write it as G plus G. And then now tilt the instrument just 90 degree, you tilt it. Now when it is fixed like this, the G acts along the axis of the spring. This is the axis of the spring, the helical spring. When it acts like this, then it is plus G, that is spring is being compressed. Now tilt 90 degree, then the spring will come in this direction, and no force will be acting along the axis of the spring, helical spring. So you will find a 0 reading. So 0, that is the 0. Now tilt another 90 degree, so it will be fixed upside down. This will be top and this will be bottom. That means the G will be acting opposite direction, and you will have minus G. That is how the three readings are obtained in an accelerometer. You can check any accelerometer by mounting in these three ways. First, as per the direction, G along the measurement direction, that you will go plus G, and then tilt 90 degree, 0, another 90 degree upside down, that means minus G. So you can measure on both sides, I mean plus G and minus G in both directions. So this calibration is mainly meant for horizontal motion. When the motion takes place horizontal, perpendicular to the G direction, the calibration is valid. It is because for vertical, when the motion is vertical, you have to be careful. In case it falls freely down, what will happen? What is the weight of the mass? Weight of any freely falling body has got zero weight. So when it is falling freely, acceleration is G, but what is shown is 0. So for vertically downward motions, whatever the instrument shows, you have to add 1 G. That you have to be careful. If the motion is against G, then you will find you have to subtract 1 G. So for vertical motion you have to be careful. Otherwise, whatever we calibrated by using G, that is valid for horizontal motion. So when it is stationary, it will be shown G. That is no motion, it is G. For vertical motions, when we go up, then it's already 1 is there, that we have to subtract. That's why for falling down from body, we have to add 1 G, and for moving up, we have to subtract 1 G from the reading. Otherwise, the calibration is valid for horizontal motion. So that is a calibration. That is how all these instruments are calibrated. Now that is cantilever type. Here we have got 300 Hz omega n. As if you have LVDT, whatever, the same. Instead of LVDT, we have strain gauge measurement. Now this type of construction is suitable for micro manufacturing. Micro manufacturing. This type of construction is valid. We have got the mechatronic components. So silicon, the so-called silicon accelerometer. Silicon accelerometer. So the whole accelerometer may be within few mm square, it can be accommodated. That is called micro manufacturing, and that is obtained for lithography or and all these photo etching principles are made use of. From silicon crystal itself, the whole mass and the lever, everything is made, and the strain gauge also will be made up of silicon, and that is amenable for the micro manufacturing, this construction, rather than the other type. That is the speciality of this cantilever type manufacturing. And another type is reluctance principles made use of. So reluctance type of accelerometer. This reluctance type of accelerometer. That is the resistance for the flow of magnetic lines, that is made use of. Now the magnetic lines are created by the excitation winding. We have probably, this may be 5 kilohertz to, it can vary 5 kilohertz, 20 kilohertz, depending upon the frequency of the, now the direction of motion is, this is the direction of motion for this xi2 dot. This mass is here, and it is supported by 4 leaf springs. These are the 4 springs. And suppose the acceleration in this direction, then the mass tries to occupy the earlier position due to inertia force. So it will deform like this. The springs will be deforming like this. That means the gap between the E stamping at the left hand side and the mass will reduce. This side gap will increase. So correspondingly, you will find here we have got more number of lines created by the, so magnetic path will be taking the, this is this also made up of iron, and E stamping is made up of iron. So you will find in these magnetic lines, number of magnetic lines will increase, and to the same extent number of magnetic lines in this E stamping will reduce. So the two secondary coils are in series opposition. So the voltage developed here and subtracted from the voltage developed here, net voltage comes here, and this voltage is a modulated one. This it will have the frequency same as the supply frequency, around supply frequency, and the magnitude, amplitude of this signal will be proportional to the deflection here. So the deflection is proportional to the our inertial force. Inertial force is proportional to our acceleration. Hence, we find EO is proportional to the acceleration, but it is a modulated signal. Since acceleration take place in both ways, this modulated signal you have to give it to phase sensitive demodulator and then low pass filter. If you want, you can use an amplifier also, and then low pass demodulator, phase sensitive demodulator, and then filter. All those circuits will be there. That I have not shown that we understand. That is something like LVDT also. We are making the measurement. Yeah. Afterwards, it is known. The signal processing is known. So that is the reluctance type of accelerometer. The inductance principle is made use of. The next type of accelerometer is piezoelectric accelerometer. It is very widely used in measuring shocks and vibrations, because it has got very high natural frequency, undamped natural frequency. So it is widely used type of accelerometer, where you find same mass is there, that is there. Now the relative measurement of mass we were using earlier types, potentiometer, LVDT, and so on, the reluctance principle. Here we are using the piezoelectric crystals. That is, say for example, quartz crystal is made use of to measure the displacement. We have learnt as one of the methods is using a quartz crystal. That is what is used here for measuring the motion, relative motion of the mass with reference to the frame of the seismic pickup. Now, here there is one problem. When we want to measure the acceleration in both the directions, the crystal can take only one direction stress. It can be only compressed. It cannot take any radial, any axial, any tensile load. It cannot take. So to avoid to overcome that difficulty, what is done is the crystal is always kept under compression by having a spring. This is a spring, leaf spring, suitably bent and by tightening the nut we can have different compression in the crystal. So when the motion is suppose motion is upwards, then the compression is will increase, and motion is downwards, acceleration downwards, compression will reduce, that's all. The crystal will never go into tensile strain. That is advantage of initial compression. Initially compress it, later on you can use for both directions. In one direction compression will increase, another direction compression will reduce. To facilitate that, we have got this special setup with the spring and nut. So it is initially assembled under compression. So now when it is subjected to any acceleration, it produces a charge, the crystal, and that is taken out and connected to a charge amplifier. The output can be read there. There is another difficulty in this accelerometer. We know accelerometer, it has got bandwidth from 0 to some omega maximum, that we know in all the other types of accelerometers what you have learnt earlier, potentiometer and cantilever type and all. But here in piezoelectric crystal, piezoelectric accelerometer, this static measurement is not possible. It is because we know the piezoelectric crystal for display measurement can be only for dynamic measurements. That is omega minimum is equal to, for that is equal to the same as single capacitor principle, 3.04 over tau. This is what you have learnt already for the single capacitor displacement transducer. The tau is the time constant of that capacitor circuit, or piezoelectric. We have got we know it is being coated metallic coating, and from there it is taken. So in between we have got this insulating material, so it's a typical capacitor. So same thing holds good. So omega minimum should be equal to 3.04 over tau. Tau is the circuit, electronic circuit for this piezoelectric crystal piece, that time constant tau. So it is sometimes omega minimum may be 10 hertz. You know, below 10 hertz you cannot measure, you cannot use this instrument. That is why it is used in measuring shocks. What is shock? Shock is shock contains continuously varying accelerations. So varying acceleration up to this frequency, that is minimum frequency, it can measure. Below than that we cannot use this one. And what is the higher range? Here mostly you will find for the omega n, the natural frequency of this is equal to root of Ks by m, that is generally that is equation. Now the m is the mass of the seismic mass, it is fine, but Ks, the spring constant of the crystal, is normally very high. It is of the order of 9 into that Ks for the piezoelectric crystal is 9 into 10 to the power of 8 to, it varies, 63 into 10 to the power of 8 Newton per meter. Such a high value it has got. So omega natural frequency is also very high. So it is of the order of omega, it is of the order of 5 kilohertz. That is now a bandwidth. I mean, we get this is a bandwidth. So it will be omega n will be still maybe maybe of this order. But another problem what we have got here is the psi is more or less 0. When it is psi 0, in the earlier case, you remember xo by k divided by xi 2 dot. For psi is equal to 0, this is beta, for this is 1. So psi is equal to 0, it is going like this. This is psi is equal to 0 curve. So range is, so for 1% or 2%, it immediately goes up. Range is beta maximum, this is beta maximum should be a small value. So you have to substitute in that equation, that is this is xo by k divided by xi 2 dot is equal to 1 over root of 1 minus beta squared whole squared plus 4 psi squared beta square. In that, suppose you can permit an error of say 5%, so 5%, then you have to give 1.05, 5%, because psi is equal to 0, so this is 0, then from this you will get beta maximum. For psi is equal to 0.5, you got approximately 0.2, beta maximum is 0.2, 5% error. When psi is equal to 0, beta maximum comes around 0.2, because this also 0.04, 5% error only for a capacitor circuit or a piezoelectric crystal. So for 5% 0.2, that means into omega n. So the beta maximum 0.2. So that is equal to omega maximum is equal to 0.2 into omega n, that now natural frequency is a high value, and it gives rise a bandwidth with which we get a bandwidth of 10 hertz to 5 kilohertz. So it may be around say 25, it may be omega n may be 25 kilohertz. So then it gives rise to say 5 kilohertz. Omega n is large value 25 kilohertz. So even though we got beta maximum is of a very small value 0.2, but still we have got measurement range of bandwidth very large. It is because that omega n is very large. So we can go up to 5 kilohertz, whereas in the earlier cases omega n itself is of the order of 300 and 0.8 times equal to 240. So 240 hertz will be maximum. Hence they cannot be used for measurement of shock where acceleration is varying at very high frequencies. You cannot use it. So in such instances we have to go only for the this piezoelectric accelerometer. Next type is servo accelerometer. So all these instruments up to here they are open loop systems, open loop instruments, open loop systems. Their accuracy is plus or minus say plus or minus 1% of the full scale. Whereas if you want to have 0.1% accuracy and or accuracy, then or uncertainty, then you should go for necessarily closed loop instruments, and this servo accelerometer is one such closed loop accelerometer. Here the basic one type basic construction it is being sketched here. So a coil is there in between permanent magnet, that is actually it's a torque coil it is called, and that is mounted on two pivot bearings with its axis. It's mounted. To the axis we have got this mass is attached to a lever connected to the axis of the coil, and at the other end we get we have a flag which is moving in between two inductive pickups. We know inductive pickups we can measure motion up to plus or minus 0.6 mm or plus or minus 1 mm. So actually they will be very close, but I have drawn like this just to for explanation purpose. And the whole axis is to the whole axis we have connected spiral spring, and the output of the displacement pickup, this is displacement pickup, inductive pickup given to the bridge network, and then the current comes through a constant resistor. The voltage drop is taken as output voltage, output signal, and when I goes through the coil, then since the coil is put in between permanent magnet, a torque is produced. So this is a construction. How it functions we can see in the signal flow diagram. This signal flow diagram of the servo accelerometer. So when xi is there, that is xi is in this direction, perpendicular to this arm, xi 2 dot. Suppose the xi is towards us, then the inertial force will be there, trying to keep it in the earlier position, inertia force. So you have a torque. This force inertia force acting at a distance r from the axis of the coil. Then you will find a torque is produced. The inertial force due to this acceleration, inertial force is felt by the mass, and that force is acting at a distance r, gives rise to a torque Ti on this supported system. The coil is a coil and assembly, it's a supported at the two pivot. This is pivot bearing, bottom and top we have got pivot bearing, so it can rotate about this axis. So a torque is applied, and there is another torque coming from the current flow that is called Tb. When this torque is larger than this feedback torque, then you will find that is the difference between the two torques is converted into an angular rotation theta by the spring. That is how it is called Te is equal to Ti minus Tb. So difference between this torque is taken up, and that is converted into angular rotation theta, and theta times this length of this lever gives a displacement in front of these two inductive pickups. And when it is when it moves, then we know how inductive pickups are functioning. So the current and it is amplified, it is a carrier frequency amplifier again. So the bridge output, the amplifier gives a current output of I. So then this I goes through the coil, then a torque is produced in opposite direction, trying to bring back the mass to its original position. Bring back. So how much current required to bring it back? It is a measure of the torque acting on this, that again inertia mass, inertia force, that again in terms of the accelerations. So proportional to acceleration, the current is maintained here, so that this is always brought back or near about the original positions. Required current is a signal. That current flowing through a constant resistor gives rise to a voltage drop EO. So now EO is our output signal XO. That is EO is our output signal. So input signal is Xi 2 dot and output signal is EO. So it's a closed loop system. It's a closed loop system. All advantages associated with the closed loop system is there. In open loop system, if the temperature rise, the spring constants will come down, then it will show a higher reading. But to bring back also, we require only smaller current. That's why the error is eliminated in any closed loop systems. Hence, closed loop systems are higher or are generally more accurate than the open loop systems. Up to 0.1 or even less than that we can obtain, depending upon the elements you have selected.